Nice to meet you again. I'm so honored to meet you here.
I am delighted to be here. You know that you are living in the real world that I live in science fiction, right? Because you've done something that...
but we all are in space already. So.
Well, and I'm hoping very hard to... I'm hoping to do some work in space to make it easier for you. When you go back.
Yeah. Right. I needed that. I really needed that kind of work, actually. Yeah.
We want to improve the ability to communicate between spacecraft and between people and robots, to try to make a rich networking environment like the internet, but operating in outer space.
Yeah, you know that in Korea we have really good networking anywhere in wireless and sometimes LAN cable.
You have the best mobile networking in the world right now.
So
that's true.
prestige.
We want to make that, the equivalent of that happen in outer space.
So already I accustomed to use the kind of wireless or very fast network, but in space I couldn't use because it's really expensive.
It's expensive and the connectivity is very limited.
Yeah, right. So I feel like that, and I need fast internet in ISS also. So you guys should do that.
So I have good news for you. Next year, we're going to put on the International Space Station the new interplanetary protocols, and we're going to be testing them during 2009 from the space station. At the end of this year, we're going to put the interplanetary protocols on the Deep Impact spacecraft. Do you remember the one that sent a probe into the comet? We're going to upload the new interplanetary protocols into the Deep Impact spacecraft, which is in orbit around the Sun, and we'll do Earth to Deep Impact testing. So by the time the end of 2009 comes along, the new interplanetary protocols will have had a couple of years of space testing. So then what we hope is that it works, and that we can then propose to use those as standards for all the spacecraft that are launched afterwards. And if we do that, if everyone agrees, then all of the communications on all these new spacecraft will be compatible. So when if Korea launches a spacecraft using the new protocols, then any previous spacecraft that are already there can be reused for communication support.
It's good, and then it will be a little more cheaper than nowadays.
I hope so. I hope so. Now, an example of this is happening today on Mars. As we just landed the Phoenix lander on the North Pole of Mars. And when it's transmitting data back to Earth, it doesn't go straight back to Earth, the big deep space network. It goes up to one of the orbiting satellites, and then it gets relayed. And so the data actually is stored on the satellite, and then when the satellite gets around in the right place in the orbit, it forwards the data to the deep space network. So we call that store and forward communication. That's exactly how the internet works. So we're already getting a flavor of what it will be like to have an internet operating in space time. So I have to ask you, what was it like when you got to the space station and you could go and look at the Earth from that far away? Did it change your view of the world?
Yeah, it's totally changed it.
How did it change?
Even though I was some kind of like optimist, but sometimes I criticize some people, and then sometimes I complain about my environment or circumstance, and then sometimes I complain about my family also. But when I saw the Earth, it's really beautiful, and then I wonder, and then how can I live there, beautiful Earth, and then I think if I were a God, I'm so angry about that, because even though I give the earth to the people as a God, but they always complain about even in beautiful earth.
In the end, of course, you did get to go.
Yeah.
Did you do the experiment that you wanted to do? Can you tell me a little bit about what that was about?
Yeah, we have so many experiments, and then there's 14. Even though I've been in 10 years, 10 days,
Yes.
but I should do 14. And then there's some kind
Wow.
of a chemical experiment, and then we had a memory also for the computer or some other device, and then tested the old one and the new one, and then there's some radiation or some kind of like different environments.
Yes.
So we should test about that. And then I also had an experiment for the children to show the Newton's law or some kind of like
Yes,
basic
especially
law of the,
when everything is weightless.
yeah, right. So it was really interesting, and then all the waters looks like gel or something. So it's really beautiful, and then I bring some Korean national flower made by the paper, and then into the water is open inside the water is really beautiful. And then some other biological experiment also, and then I should take a photo on the Earth to check the environment or to check the climate and the weather. Yeah, there's a 14, but I don't know exactly memory of whole things in
You
detail.
did well. You did a lot in that
Yeah,
10-day
yeah,
period.
yeah, and then one more interesting thing is the Korean food also. And then, you know kimchi? And
Yes.
I bring kimchi in space at the very
The
first
first time.
Yeah. So you know that even though I'm an engineer, I don't know about internet or network inside. Just to
Yes,
use it.
I understand.
I'm just
You
a
use
user.
it. You
Yeah.
use it. Yes.
I'm
Oh,
just a
I'm glad
user.
to hear that. I hope you're using
Yeah.
Google.
And then I heard that the very first and ARPANET is some kind
that's
of
the
like
predecessor.
father of the internet. And then, you know that if you have something, it's easy to use. But I know that it's really, really hard to develop that. And then, so how can you make it? How can you develop the internet at the very fast time?
You know, the beginning of this work, all we were trying to do was to take packet switching technology, that's the store and forward technology I mentioned earlier, and make it work in mobile radio, in wirelines, telephone wirelines, and in satellite. So we wanted all three of those communication systems to be able to interconnect with each other. And in a sense, the problem was very self-defining. There were so many constraints that the design sort of emerged from the problem. And the design was intentionally very, very simple. The only thing we were trying to do was to get a little bag of bits to go from one place in the net to someplace else. The network had no idea what it was carrying. All it knew is that it was carrying some just binary data, digital data, from one place to another. And it turned out that was a really good decision to make the network as simple as possible, because since the net doesn't know what the applications are, you can try anything you can figure out on it, because it doesn't know that it's voice or video or email or a web page. All it knows is it's bits going back and forth. So that turned out to be the key to a very, very flexible network design. And it meant that anyone who wanted to try a new application could just put it onto the network and try it out. You didn't have to change the net, and you didn't have to ask permission from someone to put this new application on, because the network couldn't tell what it was. So that design was done 35 years ago in 1973. And it took about 10 years to get the implementations on a number of different operating systems. But by 1983, we started running the full internet for the academic community. And then, of course, 10 years later, the general public got a chance to use it too.
Nowadays, it's really hard to find exactly what I want, because flood of the information, so many things inside, and sometimes I wonder which is right or not, and which is written by elementary school student or the PhD, and
That's
so confusing.
It's actually a very good point, and it's true that it's not obvious what information is accurate and carefully considered, and what information is just wrong or a speculation. And so one thing that I try to tell students is that they should think about what they're seeing on the internet and try to evaluate whether that's accurate information or not. Sometimes you can do that by correlating other information to see if it's the same. Sometimes you might go to a person whose opinion you trust and say, is that right?
Yeah, right.
Sometimes you might even go to a library and look in a book or in a magazine and say, is this information the same as the internet? I think it's really important for everyone to recognize that the information has varying quality, and you really have to think carefully about it. That's true in the other media, too. You know, when you open up a magazine, sometimes the information is accurate and sometimes it's not. Sometimes the television show is accurate or inaccurate information. So for all the media, it's important to think about whether the information is really valid. And then by that means filter out the parts that are not useful. So if we all learn how to do that, we'll use our information better.
I don't know why, but nowadays some people think about that, and then the information from internet is more trustful than other things. You know that even though some people find an article or journal in library, they wonder which is right or not. Even though PhD or some very famous scholar write down on that, but even in internet, some children like that, and then people
they think
believe
that it's more,
it's true.
Yes. This is really important. I'm so glad you made this point. This problem shows up in the other media as well, that unless you know something about the source, the reason that you see people thinking that the internet information is more accurate is that it was easier to find. There's nothing to do with the accuracy. It was just easier to find. And we see that that situation recurring in newspaper articles, for example. If you read an article that's about something you actually know about, then you'll find several mistakes here because you know already that that's wrong. But when you read an article that's about something you don't know anything about, how do you know? So you assume it's true, even if it's not. And so this idea of critical thinking and critical evaluation of the information you get is important, not just in the internet, but in the newspapers, the magazines, the radio. Even your friends and your parents may have mistakes and wrong ideas that you have to think about.
Thanks to do that, I can have very many foreign friends also, and even maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we don't. There's not that many people use internet. There's not that many people use the messenger program. But I already said to you, and then in my school we use the messenger program or internet. So at the time, there's a few Korean people use that. I can have foreign friends in US or in Europe. So I think it's really helpful for me to study English language and then to get friends in foreign countries. So I think it's a really good side of the internet. What do you think about language or friendship or something about
Actually, I agree with you. And what we're seeing is that people who are playing these role-playing games on the network often have friends around the world that they interact with. And I think it helps in several ways. First of all, it gives people a sense of being part of the whole world, not just this small domestic place. And, you know, for kids that are meeting people in this virtual space, I hope what they discover is that kids are the same all around the world. And when they grow up and political tensions happen, they'll remember, wait a minute, those are people just like me.
Yeah, right.
And whatever tension there might be could be eroded by the memory that these are just other human beings sharing this fragile planet. So I hope that the more internet there is out there, the more it will link people to each other and help them appreciate that we're all part of the same environment. Something else that Google is eager to do, but it's hard to do, is to help people who don't share a common language.
Google Earth at the very first time is really fantastic.
Everyone got excited about that.
Yeah, and at the time I find my car in front of my
Really?
office because it's not in detail, but I can know that because always whenever I park my car in that place,
It's always there.
Yeah,
Okay.
wow, there was my car.
That has to be my
it was
car.
Amazing, yeah.
Of course, I don't know how timely the imagery was. I mean, it takes us a while to go all the way around the world replacing the images, and so they don't get updated too frequently. That's, in fact, something we want to work on, is to get imagery updated more quickly, because things change. in this city, just driving around in this city, I saw all these buildings going up, which means that in 6 months' time, the profile of the city is going to look different, and we need to get new imagery to make it up to date.
Yeah, and I was a little confusing when I arrived in Moscow in cosmonaut training center, because when I was in Korea, all my friends use email,
Right.
and then all around my place have internet access. So I think it's just natural. I think it's just a part of my life. But when I arrived in GCTC,
No internet
maybe
service?
several people use that, not all.
I see.
And then when I was in middle school, I used a modem. Nowadays, I couldn't find a modem at all with the telephone
And you had to
cable.
use dial-up when you were there.
Yeah, but in GCTC,
Yeah.
I should use a modem with a telephone cable.
Yes,
So
yes.
it was a big shock for me. But still, I heard that. After that, I heard that there's so many people who couldn't use the internet until now. So there's a very big gap between the people between the kind of things. So I think it's also some kind of serious problem. And then, yeah, at the very first time, we want to be a globalization, and then we want to communicate each other very fully. But still have some people even don't know about concept of the internet. I
That's
think.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the statistics are so overpowering. Only 20% of the world is online right now. Only 20%.
Wow.
But that's 1.3 billion people. But the other 80%, that's 5.2 billion people, are not online yet. And so with my chief internet evangelist hat on, I have the feeling that I have a lot of work ahead of me to get another 5.2 billion people online. Fortunately, there are increasing numbers of ways to put people online, and mobiles are one example of that. There are about 3 billion mobiles in use around the world now. Some of them belong to the same people, so it's not 3 billion people. But more and more of those devices are internet-enabled. And as a result, probably some people will have their first experience using the internet through a mobile. And then later they may wind up with laptops and Wi-Fi and some of the other high-speed services. So that's what we're focused on at Google, is bringing our applications to people through mobiles as well as through laptops and desktops, because we think that will be very common.
Sometimes I found a translator through the internet, but sometimes it's a little strange, and then sometimes
Yes.
it's very comfortable for me, but most of them is a little strange. And then if you know that I can speak English and I can speak Korean, so sometimes I use a translator for testing, but it's a little, it's totally different sentence becomes.
Yeah.
So, but how, it's a little better than that one? Is a Google Translator? Or?
Well, right now, the Google Translator is rated by our National Institutes of Standards and Technology as the best quality translation available. Now, that does not necessarily say that it's wonderful and perfect and natural
Yeah,
language
okay.
and everything else. Google is very interested in improving natural language translations. We work with 23 languages now. We're hoping to get to 42. One of the most important things about machine translation is getting the semantics and the grammar right, and in particular getting idiomatic expressions to come out right. Just an anecdote, in many years past, computer scientists thought that all you had to do was put the dictionary for two languages into the computer, and then it would just translate. And so there's a story about someone who translated the expression "out of sight, out of mind" in English into Russian, and then they translated it back. And it came back, "invisible idiot." And said, okay, that wasn't what we meant. So that was a long time ago, and today I think we would probably do better. But we recognize the importance of being able to translate information accurately, so that people who don't happen to have a native language capability in French or German or Korean, for that matter, can have access to the body of the material in some form. And so I think this is really important, especially for Korean material, that all of us would like to have available to the rest of the world, but much of the rest of the world doesn't speak or read Korean. So the better we can make that translation, the more some of the wonderful works in the Korean language can be accessible to people outside. And perhaps even more important, casual interactions, like the ones we talked about before, could be undertaken where each party is speaking their native languages while seeing the exchanges from the other person. It's still going to be a very difficult process to get high-quality translations on a consistent basis. But one of the reasons that we have offices here is to try to use our talent in Korea to help us do a better job of translations.
I think it's really good. Thanks for that kind of translator. I feel a little, I think it's really good for the foreign journalist or a foreign reporter, because when I had astronaut training program, and we don't have much English versions website, but they have some kind of like translator, like machine translator, and then some other foreign journalists can read about Korean program. Even my private blog, and then they just use the translator, and then they know my training process or something.
So they
Yeah, the very first is a very famous, not an actress, model, fashion model, and then she's very famous in Korea. So she worrying about anonymity. And then you know that under some article, they can write down some very bad words because they don't have name on the article. So
this
it's
is
a very big problem.
Anonymity, right.
And then you know that I also felt like that after being an astronaut. Some unknown people write down on
terrible
that.
things.
Yeah, terrible things. So, and then actually for me, it's not that bad. For my family or for my mother, and then she think I'm the most beautiful woman in the Korea, just for my mother, only for my mother. But other people write down and wow, how ugly she is or something like that. So she's very painful for that.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think about anonymity through
well,
the internet?
Actually, this is an interesting problem because sometimes being able to speak anonymously is important. Suppose that you want to raise the visibility of something that's going on in the government, for example, that is bad, or maybe something in the criminal world, but you're afraid to say something if you are identified, because then something bad might happen to you. And so the ability to speak without identifying yourself can sometimes be useful to the society. On the other hand, as you say, speaking anonymously makes people feel like they're shielded and they can say really bad things and nothing will happen. Right. By the way, this happens when people drive cars too. You know, they have this glass shield. It's called a windshield in the car, and they think, oh, now that I'm protected by the windshield, I can say all kinds of terrible things, and you can. So I think we need to support anonymity. I don't think we should eliminate it. But at the same time, I think we should introduce tools into the net that allow you and me to identify ourselves to each other in a way that's believable, that's credible. It says, someone else could claim to be me and say, hi, I think you're ugly. And I would never say that, but someone else might say that. So I need to be able to show to you that it's me.
And in addition, I want to ask about that as a user, not an engineer, like that kind of field. And then, is it possible to use the computer, internet through my computer, like in my home or like in my office, in space?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what we're hoping we can do. The only thing you need to worry about, though, you know this better than I do, you're in a high radiation environment when you're out in space, and some pieces of equipment that are for commercial use might not survive, a sunspot, sunburst or something. But aside from that, functionally speaking, it should work just fine. And what we imagine is that scientists is sitting here on planet Earth in her comfortable living room on the regular terrestrial internet and interacting with a spacecraft somewhere else. Or maybe you're in orbit around Mars, and we've got sensor systems on the surface and maybe some robots, and you're interacting with them remotely from your location in the orbiter. So those kinds of flexible communication systems could be implemented with the new protocols, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting question for me. And then I shoot so many experiments in space.
Yes.
And then he wondered about that. Did you want to drink liquor or something after the experiment? And
Liquor?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean, I
Yeah.
see. Okay,
Yeah.
to celebrate.
Yeah,
Remember
right.
when you said that if you managed to get to 30,
Yeah.
or maybe 300, that you were going to buy beer for all of your friends?
Yeah, right.
So that was your way of celebrating.
Yeah, but you
so
know
this
that
was she
if-
saying the same thing, that after a successful experiment?
Yeah, or do you want to? Maybe it's too hard, so I need to drink. You know that it's very hard
and
circumstance.
so you
we
need to-
need some vodka or some beer.
This sounds very Russian.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then it sounds very Korean also.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
right.
also a popular way of dealing with
Right.
stress,
And
is
then
to...
do you know the soju is a very traditional Korean liquor? And then
Yes.
whenever we feel so tired, whenever we
Yes.
feel so stressful,
Yes.
we miss the soju actually.
well,
Yeah, only with my friends.
isn't that actually not good for you when you're in space, though? I mean, does
Yeah,
alcohol
actually,
do
it's
anything
illegal.
to you?
It's illegal. Nobody can bring the alcohol
Well, even
to
if
the station.
even I could understand why you don't want drunken astronauts.
Yeah, right.
But because they might make a bad mistake and it could be fatal. But just physiologically, would there be an enhanced bad effect because you're weightless, the pressure is low, oxygen is, I don't know. Nobody knows because we didn't let anybody get drunk in space.
Right, and then nowadays there's so limited people live in station, and then
Yes.
all the astronauts should have mission to support the life system,
Yes.
life support system.
Yes.
So we couldn't drink at all, and then we couldn't bring any liquor to there. So, but sometimes we just talk about some vodka or something. Well, we miss a vodka, and then right now we need a vodka, but we couldn't drink.
You
at
couldn't
all.
drink it.
But maybe when we have a hotel room in
You're
station,
thinking exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That when we get hotels in space, it won't be such a
yeah, and
problem.
we can have a wine like that.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, if, in the normal course of your career at this point, would you come to the United States or interact with the other astronauts in the U.S. for any reason? Would there be perhaps joint programs or something that you would undertake?
Yeah, right. And of course, we have some kind of collaborate program with the foreign astronaut officially, but non-officially, I also have many foreign astronauts. So I should visit them. I should have some kind of party with them. So I think I will make a plan after my very busy time, like here right now, but after several months, I think I can enjoy like that, and then I can visit you also.
Well, I'm going to I'll make two offers to you. First of all, please come and visit Google's headquarters in the Googleplex at Mountain View.
Okay.
We'll introduce you to the Google Earth and the
please.
Google Sky people.
Yeah, please, without camera.
Without cameras,
Yeah.
okay, no cameras. And second, I would love to invite you to come to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory,
Wow.
take a tour and see what we're doing, and
I'd
meet the
love
people that are building the interplanetary internet.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then I have last question for
Yes.
you. And you know that very highly developed IT technology in Korea, and then so many people work with that. And then I think that we also have some kind of like blue ocean in space, outer space project for the internet for Korea. And then what do you think about that? And then Korean people also develop some very highly, very critical things include that project, or can we do something for that?
Well, the first observation I make is you clearly have highly qualified, well-educated engineers and scientists here. You're one of them.
Wow, thank you.
And the evidence is all around us with the mobiles at the speeds that they're running and all the applications and the gadgets that I've seen. So I actually am expecting to see some very thoughtful and inventive applications coming out of Korea for all of us to use on the internet. And that's one of the reasons that Google is here, because we want to have access to those very smart and creative people so everyone can share what they can do.
Yeah, I think so. And then, yeah, the very real last thing, and then please give some comment for the Google user in Korea and then internet user in Korea.
The internet users in Korea, well, the internauts in Korea,
Right.
are important to us. partly because of the unique environment that you're in with all this high tech available. And so you represent a very interesting test bed for us to try out new ideas. And so sometimes people living here will be the first ones to see some of the new ideas coming out.
Wow, it's good. I'm so honored to talk with you, and it's a really, really interesting conversation with you right now.
Yeah, for me too. It's a real pleasure and an honor to meet